I'll now take the sediment for the meeting of the Executive Committee of the 28th of April 2021. Councillor Allison, I see that you're here. Also Councillor Anderson. Councillor Bradley is here. Councillor Brown.
Yes, I'm here.
I see that you're here, thank you. Councillor Callaghan is here, as is Councillor Chalmers. Councillor Convery is here. I have an apology from Councillor Cooper. I'll go into substitutes later. Councillor Corbett. Councillor Corbett is here. Councillor Craig.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Devlin is here. Councillor Dorman is here. Councillor Fagan is here. Councillor Faulkner is here. Councillor Hamilton is also here, as is Councillor Logan. Councillor Loudon.
I'm here.
Thank you. I have apologies from Councillor Lowe. Councillor McAdams.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Councillor McCreary is here. I have apologies from Councillor McGuigan. Councillor Miller.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Nealon is here. Councillor Nelson.
Apologies from Councillor Nelson. Councillor Harrell will be substituted.
Thank you.
And he is here.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Ross is here. Councillor Shearer is also here. Councillor Wardhaw is here. Councillor Wilson.
Apologies for Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. In terms of substitutes, Councillor Greenshields is here.
Yeah.
Councillor Harrow is also here. Councillor Horsham.
I'm here.
Thank you. And Councillor Watson? No, Councillor Watson is not here, so he is not substituting. Thank you, Chair. I'll hand back to you to continue the business of the meeting.
Thanks very much, Pauline. Before we start today's meeting, I would just like to remind members that today is International Workers' Memorial Day, and normally a number of the members here would attend this ceremony, which usually takes place at lunchtime, and in which the Provost is usually heavily involved. The Provost has made a video recording because of the COVID restrictions for today, and unfortunately a number of other members are attending meetings. I have instructed the clerk to arrange a minute's silence for 12 o'clock, regardless of which meeting we're in, and that will be observed, and Pauline will let us know, depending on what meeting we're in, when that minute's silence will take place. So thanks very much, members. Can we start with the business then? Are there any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. Item 2 is minutes of the previous meeting held on 10th of March. These are on pages 3 to 12. Is there any business arising from the previous meeting?
Chair, Councillor Brown has his hand up.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just the item I have raised at the leaders' meeting, which is item 10 about the Stewartfield Way thing, where regardless of the outcome of the vote, I think it was agreed there would be a presentation to members. I wonder if that could be reflected in the minutes.
Yes, I have no problem with that at all, Robert. We'll get that reflected in the minutes, and we'll let you know when that's arranged, and we'll take that up. Okay, thanks very much. I would then move the minutes.
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can we move on to item 3, which is the Capital Programme 2021 monitoring for period 12. That's on pages 13 to 24, and I would invite Paul to speak to this report, please.
Okay, thanks, Chair. As you see, this is the monitoring to period 12, so that takes us up to the 26th of February. It's a fairly lengthy report. I'll go through the highlights to it. So that the opening section obviously just lays out the background. Section 4, which is in the second page of the paper, lays out the financial implications. And in that part of the paper, what it talks through are adjustments to the capital programme. Now, what we would try not to do is to adjust the 2020-21 programme after the December Executive Committee meeting. What you'll see here, and these are, I think, contained on page 19, they are adjustments to the 2021-22 programme. So there are things that we're looking to get started that we're bringing before members in order to get those approved and the spend begun on these. So again, you can see that in the appendix. Remember, we've put together an outturn for the revenue budget and for the capital programme. And one of the things that you'll remember from previous committee reports is the fact that in that capital programme position that we were forecasting to the end of the year, we were including an element of COVID costs to be funded from capital. So this is picked up at section 4.3. And that figure was £7.891 million. Now, one of the things that we have advised in previous reports is that a change in approach to how that spend is funded might be considered as we get towards the year end. And that change would be basically to use revenue funding rather than capital funding to pay for these costs. Now, what you'll pick up from the revenue report, which follows this one, is that there has been additional funding received. And what's being proposed in here is that that funding within the revenue budget is used to fund that £7.891 million of costs, which were previously being funded through capital. So as a result, and this is picked up at 4.5, that amount of £7.891 million in terms of funding is available if that's done for other projects within the capital programme. And I'll come back to that point later in the paper. The section 4.6 covers the overall position in terms of spend and the position against individual resources. And what we're looking at is an outturn. You can see this at section 4.10 of £63.1 million. Now that's a bigger underspend than we had suggested in the last report, to the extent of £2.6 million. And sections 4.11 and 4.12 give a bit of background to that. So there are a number of projects. This is covered at 4.11, where they've seen their outturns reduce for the first time this period. So these are new things that we expected to spend less. 4.12 picks up areas that we were looking at previously, which we're going to underspend, where the underspend has increased. So that contributes towards this position at the year end. Section 4.15 looks at the money that's actually gone through the books up to that position of 26th of February. So that's the actual spend at that point in time. And section 5, which you can see on page 16 of your papers, looks at the position of the housing programme. So we've got a programme there of £48.172 million. Now, section 6 looks at the programme for 2021-22, and these are changes that have been made to the capital funding that we've got to work with as the local government finance bill went through Parliament. So again, just at 6.3 and 6.4, we follow the story through there. There was initially an additional capital allocation of £82 million for town centres and bridges. Remember, that's a national figure. And the points picked up that profile of spend, that additional money that's coming to councils is going to change, right? So rather than £82 million in 2021-22, it's going to be spread across 2 financial years. And picked up at 6.3, you can see an additional national allocation of £40 million that went in for green recovery. And at the end of 6.3, you can see a bit of the detail as to what that is intended to be used for. Now, on page 17, just coming towards the end of the paper, at 6.6, we return to that point I was discussing a second ago, that on the revenue side of our budget, there is more COVID funding that could pay for costs that we previously expected to have to fund from the capital programme. And what we get to at 6.7 is a proposal around what could be done with the money that's freed up within the capital programme as a consequence. So you can see there reference to a proposal that would put £6 million towards Larkhall Leisure Centre, and I'll come back to give further detail on that. and it suggested £1.891 million towards digital transformation. Now, for both of those things, what we're suggesting happens is that comes back as part of the report to the June Executive Committee, where we would get further details of profile of spend and details of spend at that meeting. Also at 6.8 and 6.9, tackling Larkhall Leisure Centre, 6.8 covers what the overall pot of money is that's allocated to that project at present, and the interaction with the cross-party working group on SLLC. And it's suggested there at 6.9 that pending the outcome of the working group and that being reported to committee, the capital funding be earmarked to support the outcome from that group, in particular in relation to Larkhall Leisure Centre. So if I can go back to the recommendations in the paper, we're looking for noting of that position at period 12. I'm looking for approval of the adjustments to the programme, which you can see in the appendix. Remember, they relate to 2021-22. I'm looking for noting of the projected outturn position. At recommendation 5, looking for approval that be given that the £7.891 million of capital funding that isn't required within the capital programme be allocated as proposed in section 6.7, and that be caught in the report that we would bring to the June committee laying out the programme for the new year. And it also notes that these things are going to be considered through the Financial Resources Scrutiny Forum. So, Chair, happy to take any questions on the paper.
Thanks very much, Paul. Does any member have any questions for Paul? I see Alex hands raised. Alec?
Yeah, first of all, before the question, it is pleasing to see funding being allocated to the Larkhall Leisure Centre. It will certainly get Councillor Nelson off my back, and it's good to see his lobbying has been successful, and I certainly hope that the working group bring forward plans that can be implemented in Larkhall. The other question, so, is the changes to the, well, it's not just the bridges funding, but the capital funding package was changed for the green recovery. Bridges are becoming an ever-increasing problem, I think, within South Lanarkshire in terms of the maintenance they require, 2 currently being replaced. What are the implications for us in terms of funding and maintaining our bridges and trying to reduce the number that are currently having to be closed periodically for emergency work?
Okay. So thanks, Chair. So just again, a couple of things in that. First of all, see the changes that are articulated at 6.3 and 6.4. These relate to national programmes of funding. So they were being announced at a national level, right? So that's obviously been reprofiled. That's been done across February and March, and we'll await to see how the allocations follow. But that's a national decision, one we don't have any control over. And to be honest, we hadn't allocated these pots of money within our programmes at this point. In terms of the money that we have identified to carry out work in bridges in the capital programmes for 2021-22, that remains. So I know we've had discussions in the past at committee on Clyde Bridge. That doesn't affect this. That stays in the programme.
Okay, I saw Michael's hand up. Michael, did you want to come in?
Yeah, it's just maybe just put a wee Chair, if it's okay, is that probably 2 things. Is that annually we report our roads asset management plan to Community and Enterprise Committee that sets out the position with all our assets, including bridges, but also within that it details our inspection regime and also our maintenance regime to ensure that our infrastructure is kept fit for purpose. However, given some of the ages of our bridges, unfortunately, they will fail from time to time, and I think that's the point that Councillor Alison is making. But just to kind of emphasise that there's a systematic maintenance, I'm echoing a wee bit here, to ensure that our infrastructure remains fit for purpose. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much. Does that answer your question, Alec?
Yeah, I take it you'll come back to us when we know the implications of the government policy change.
Of course, yeah, only too happy to do so. Are there any other questions for Paul? I don't see any other hands raised. Right, I would move the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can move on to item 4, which is the revenue budget, monitoring for period 12, and that's on pages 25 to 42. And I would ask Paul to give us a report on this as well, please.
Thank you, Chair. The paper starts off by giving it says it's section 4, and this is on page 26 on the second page of the report, a summary of the previously reported probable outturn. So, you are all too aware, right, of the long story around our revenue budget and the additional streams of funding and the additional cost because of the very particular nature of year 2021. So what we did across December into February was report our probable outturn. And you can see that in that table, which is table 1. That recaps the position that we got to at the last committee in estimating our outturn at the end of the year. And that was an underspend of just over £250,000. What you'll also see from that table is that did include COVID costs that we didn't have funding for at that point in time. So what I'll sort of spend most time talking through when I'm presenting this paper is the executive summary, right? So this is section 5, and this really captures the main points in the paper. So it starts off by making that point that we've got that underspend that we were forecasting to the end of the year, but it did include COVID costs of £1.9 million that we didn't have funding for when we did our outturn. So in 5.2, it picks up the point that we've received more money. So the council's received, since we last reported to you, COVID funding totalling £27.861 million. Now that is for the costs of COVID. And that figure of £27.8 million splits down into 2 chunks. One is around £21.2 million. So that's money that we were given in 2021 for year 2021. And there's also just under £7 million that we were given in 2021, but it's for year 21-22. So that there's a multi-year aspect of this, right? And what this is pointing towards is the fact that we will need to carry forward a significant amount of this money into next year. So what 5.3 picks up on is a proposal as to what we do with part of that additional COVID funding that we've got. And this is the thing that we just talked through in terms of the capital report. Some of that extra £27 million is used to pay for COVID costs, which we had in the capital programme. So that's the thing I talked you through in the previous paper. Now, what the next section, so that's 5.4, and table 2 tried to summarise is what our position is going to end up as if we do that, if we follow that approach. So again, you can see this summarised in that second table, which is at the top of page 27. And what it means is if we use nearly £8 million of that money to pay for those costs in the capital programme, there is funding that we got in year 2020-21 that's getting carried forward into year 21-22 of just over £18 million, right? So that's new, right? Remember, that funding is for COVID, and I haven't reported this to you up to this point, right? Because we've now been given this money. So, the fact that there's going to be £18 million further or additional carried forward to next year's reserves is something that I do need to point out to you. Section 5.5 just goes into a wee bit more detail of that £18 million. And this is picked up in things like the appendices. You can see the detail in there. 9 million of it is for a specific purpose. So, for example, money that we've been given for education, right? There is part of that £18 million that's got a specific road to go down. Now, the other point I would make is, what does this mean for our overall outturn position? You'll remember the point I made at the start of this presentation. What we were saying, right, per our outturn was underspend of £250,000, but in getting to that position, we had £1.9 million of COVID costs that we didn't have money for. Well, after this, we do. So that improves our outturn position, and it gives us an outturn of just over £2 million. So that's picked out in that table 3. You can see at 5.6, and then at 5.7 we give an indication as to what I might come back in the year-end report and suggest that we do with that. But again, we do need to be aware of the fact that there are going to be COVID costs in the year that we're now in that are going to require to be funded. So that's really the executive summary, right, of what's contained in that paper. There's one other thing that I would just draw your attention to, and that's on page 30. And it's at section 7.4, which talks about area committee grants. And again, as a result of representations from I think the chairs of all of the area committees, there was a sentiment that it was unfair given the year that had been suffered and maybe the opportunities that community groups hadn't had to access funds, that they lose them over the financial year end. So the suggestion there is that that's carried forward into next year so that communities through the area committees have access to that. And what I'm suggesting is when we do the year end report in June, that will be a feature of that. So if I can go back to the recommendations, we're looking for noting of the additional COVID funding, looking for approval of the utilisation of £7.891 million of that money to pay for the costs that were previously being picked up by the capital programme. I'm looking for noting of the reserves position. I'm looking for noting in terms of the year-end position and the position as well at the 26th of February. So again, Chair, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Paul. Does any member have any questions for Paul?
No hands, Chair.
No. I would move the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Can we move on to item 5, which is additional funding from the Scottish Government and other external sources in pages 43 to 46. And again, I would invite Paul to give us this report, please.
Thanks, Chair. Again, you can see within the paper, we've got additional revenue funding of £40.246 million for 2021 and £15.855 million for 2021-22. There's a couple of things I would just draw your attention to in there. Obviously, the figure of £40.2 million is a good deal higher than the figure of £27 million I referred to in the last paper. And that's the main reason for that difference is the fact that within this paper, we're including the money that we've been given for business fund grants. So that doesn't improve the council's position because we simply act as an agent, comes in and it gets paid out, but we include it in these additional resources. So that's the reason why the figure's a bit higher in this paper than in the previous one. The other thing that you can see in the second from bottom line in that table in the appendix is our share of £259 million of flexible funding, which has been given in year 21-22. So again, that's in addition to the monies we talked about in the previous paper. So that comes to £15.329 million. There is going to be a difference in the way that money is allocated from the government in 2021-22 for costs of COVID. They have listened to councils, and as much as what a point that councils had made was that we had just a plethora of monies, individual pots of money coming through across the course of year 2020-21, and what councils had asked for was more flexibility, and that's the reason for the name of that fund. We are getting more money through a single route, so we're getting a single sum of £15 million allocated. We just need to be aware of the extent of the costs of COVID that we've suffered in year 2020-21 when we're considering that amount, and also the amounts that we're carrying forward from year 2021 into 21-22. So that's a sort of starting amount of £15 million. So again, looking for noting of that additional funding. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Does any member have any questions? Alec, I see your hands raised.
Certainly, John. It's pleased to see this extra funding come through, particularly in the past when I've asked about extra funding regarding funding coming into the Scottish Government and been told that there was nothing available. We're getting an extra 56 million in the total when nothing was available is pleasing. Many analysts still say that all the funding that has come to the Scottish Government has not been passed on. Have you had any indication as to when they are going to release those funds? Because it certainly seems disappointing they're leaving it so late in the financial year, rather than when they were getting the money in and it could do some good.
I have no knowledge of additional funding that's lying there that hasn't come out, Alex, so I think that's something we would need to take up, but I have no knowledge of funding that's not been distributed from the Scottish Government that they've been given, so that's something we'll take up certainly through COSLA. Are there any other questions of Paul? No, I would move the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Move on to item 6, which is resource plans and Connect reporting, pages 47 to 130. And I would ask Tom Little to give us this report, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this brings before the committee the 21-22 resource plans. And members might recall that last year we started a process of evolution with the resource plans to make them shorter and more sharply focused on priorities. So we've tried to continue that evolution this year, and a key part of that has been bringing them forward for approval at an earlier stage in the year, so it more closely aligns with broader planning and budget setting. So this brings you those plans, and also as part of that, it brings you an overview of how the Council Plan Connect will be reported this year, because obviously they are intertwined. So to take to section 4 in the report, as previously, the starting point for the resource plans is that resources undertake a horizon scanning exercise, and that's as described in 4.1 at your report. And the result of that is in 4.2, which is page 48 of your papers. And we asked resources to select a maximum of 10 areas that they regarded as key themes for the year ahead. And so we've laid them out for you in the table there at 4.2. There won't be any great surprises in there, but you will see some synergy. You'll see, for example, that COVID-19 response and recovery features prominently in all 5 of the resource plans. And again, I don't think that will surprise anyone. So we've attached all the resource plans for you at Appendix 1, and you'll see that, as usual, they include details of the actions that will be taken forward in the year ahead, together with those performance measures that we'll use to monitor progress. Now, as well as the measures that resources have come up with from their own resource outcomes, we have added in that layer, that usual layer of additional actions and measures that we use to develop the theme of delivering the plan and achieving best value. So for 21-22 at present, there's a total of 316 measures identified within the draft resource plans, and of those, 101 have been identified for reporting progress of Connect. And the detail of all that's laid out for you in the table at 5.4, which is on page 49 of your report. Now, 5.4 also notes that the development process is continuing, and that the final number of measures is likely to change. And at this point, I take you back up, if I may, to 4.4 in the report, which is also on page 49. Now, it notes in a bit more detail that change in sequence for the approval process that I spoke about before. And it notes that we've not only tried to speed things up this year, but we've also brought these resource plans to this committee together as a pack for you to look at before they go individually to their particular resource committees. Now, I'd point out that development of the education resource plan is slightly behind in this process, and that's due in part to the rigours of the academic year and also the changing landscape that the resources faced in this particular year behind us. But I can assure the committee that since this exec committee report was prepared, significant progress has been made, and that we know that by the time this plan, the education resource plan, goes to education committee, we expect to see its format and numbers of measures much more in line with those of the other resource plans. So if I could take you back to the recommendations, they are to approve the resource plans. 2 and 3 basically ask you to note the content within them, and 4, which is key, is that the resource plans will now go forward to the relevant resource committees and will note for noting and then for performance monitoring thereafter at Q2 and Q4. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Tom. Does any member have any questions? I see Robert has his hand up. Robert?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. One or two points I made. First of all, can I welcome the earlier date of the resource plans. I think it makes much more logic to have this at an earlier point of the financial year than we have had in the past. 2 or 3 things come out of it. There's a mention in Paul's report about service reviews, and I just wonder if we could maybe get at some point an updated list of the ones which we have planned for that, because that's been something which has been quite important in the taking forward of a number of strategies, financial planning, and all that sort of things. 2 other points, if I may. One is on the page 58 to 59. There's various measures to do with town vacancy rates and 3-year business survivals and things of that kind. Now, that presumably has been not exactly shot out of the air, but certainly damaged by the COVID situation we're currently facing. And I just wonder if we've got particular measures which we can actually focus in on that, which will actually be of assistance in trying to kind of reduce the likely reduction, the likely increase in town vacancy rates, in particular offices, shops, and what have you. And then finally, if I may, on the litter strategy on page 61, I've had a thought at the back of my mind for a while that coming out of COVID, we need a sort of brightening up sort of approach towards things. Litter, dog fouling, fly tipping has been the subject of a lot of disputes with and discussion at this committee before. Are we planning any kind of particular substantial initiatives within that which will actually get to grips with some of these things and get on top of what I think has been the increase in litter problems, dog fouling problems, and the like over the course of the COVID position? More dogs, perhaps people being a little bit less careful with what they've been doing, less enforcement, and so on and so forth. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you, Robert. Tom?
Well,
I'm not sure who you'll direct that to.
Well, I'm happy to accept Councillor Brown's praise for bringing them earlier, and then probably at that point I hand over to others to let them answer the details.
Michael, litter.
Yeah, so if we can maybe pick up the first couple of points from Councillor Brown is on the town vacancy rate. We've kind of put a target there that looks back pre-COVID as a Scottish average, as a benchmark, Councillor Brown. We thought that was probably the most kind of reasonable way to go about it. In terms of supporting our town centres, for those members that are on Community and Enterprise Committee, you'll see a paper there next week which gives an update on all the projects and the initiatives that we're taking forward to support our town centres. And I think, as Paul referred to in the previous report, it appears that further funding will be coming for our town centres, and we'll continue to work with our stakeholders and the communities to direct that funding to support them. In a very similar way about the number of business supported, etc., we do have a new business gateway contractor in place from the 1st of March, and one of the emphasis in that new contract is to support the creation of new businesses and have a survival rate of more than 3 years. Obviously, hopefully as we move into recovery and post-COVID, that will still remain a challenge. But again, that's down as a kind of benchmark figure. In terms of litter strategy and all things associated with waste, we do appreciate that there there is a concentration, particularly around fly tipping, and I've been speaking to many members about this, and maybe I can summarise the position, which kind of relates to the dog fouling issue as well, is that we will continue to lift fly tipping where it is on public land. I do appreciate members get a bit frustrated where it's unfortunately private sector land, but that is the legislation. So we'll continue to do that. Through Tom's team, we continue to promote through our social media the environmental impact of fly tipping, and also the cost of fly tipping to the public purse. And it's interesting, the sentiment within social media is starting to shift to actually recognise that people are causing this problem, not the council. The other aspect is that we are stepping up our enforcement. The evidential requirements to take someone to court and charge them is really quite high, and a lot of it is based on either officers seeing it or getting appropriate images with cameras, and we are deploying them as best we can. Because I think if we then start to demonstrate that we will catch you, I think that should hopefully change the behaviour behaviours. And I think, Councillor Brown, just on the dogfiling issue, we've discussed this before, and I know you've recently contacted me, so we'll have an update on that. But I think as we move into recovery again and post-lockdown, we maybe step up that enforcement, because it is very unfortunate. People, not dogs, his behaviours does allow this to happen. And so I'm hoping that kind of addresses the points raised, Chair. Thanks.
That's very helpful, Chair. Could I come back on just on one point there? I mean, effectively, I think that all of that is good stuff that we're looking to have. I wonder, however, if we can look again at the wanted campaign we had before, or something similar on the dog fouling thing, with a view to trying to target the thing, because it's a bit like a needle in a haystack otherwise, isn't it? You're trying to sort of cross the whole of South Lanarkshire on this issue, and then coming in on the places where there are particular sort of challenges. So I think a targeted campaign of some kind, both on that and perhaps on the litter thing, might be a very relevant sort of thing to look at. It's something I have discussed with Michael before, as he rightly says. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks very much. Paul, did you want to come in the back of that? I see your hands raised.
It was probably just on Councillor Brown's first point in his list around service reviews. It was just to say that officers are at present working to put together the basis and foundation for a programme of these, and via yourself and group leaders, we would look to establish a way of reporting on progress and outputs from those. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Paul. I see Jim Warthaw's hand is raised. Jim?
Yeah, I was just to raise on page 57, one of the priorities is high quality streets and parks. In that connection, I'd like to raise the issue of Calder Glen Country Park. Now, we've got two country parks. I'm not sure what the usage in Shartle Row is, but I know that the usage of Calder Glen has increased markedly, and in the last year the number of people going there have been fairly incredible. The problem is that the park has no capital spend allowance. So anything that has to be done from the revenue budget, and that means it's done on an ad hoc basis when it's necessary. I mean, at the moment, you cannot walk from East Kilbride to Blantyre along the length of the park, because at least one section of the path has been subject to a landslip and it's gone. The condition of a lot of the other paths is not really conducive to people using, unless they are fairly fit. The roadway and the car park have deteriorated badly. We've got problems with flooding, which is now becoming, extremely common. Cricket fields, floods during the summer. Doesn't matter so much in the winter, but what also happens is that the flooding in the drive, there are trees, mature trees, which are spending big periods of time throughout the year basically underwater, and that's not going to do them any good. And I would really like to see some way of getting capital spend into the country park, because it's one of our biggest assets. It's certainly one of East Kilbride's biggest assets. Is there any prospect of getting the country parks, particularly Calder Glen, into the capital programme so we can get it back to the condition it should really be in?
I'd like to think so. Michael, is there any plans at the present time or any revenue sources that we're already looking at? I know that we put money by in the budget for footpaths, etc.
I think, yes, Chair, maybe just to pick up on a couple of points in a general comment about capital funding, it is unfortunate that the landslip that's happened within the park itself, but certainly my understanding that isn't down to a lack of maintenance. It's actually caused by a third party, which we are dealing with to try and rectify. So I would also say that I'm not necessarily disputing some of the detailed issues that Councillor Wardhaw is outlined there. But I think the park, in terms of its environment, its look, its feel, and it is attractive, it is still in pretty good condition. That's not to say that there's areas that need maintenance, so I was saying I wouldn't dispute that. We do have funding within capital and revenue, and that's prioritised where we can see where those works have to happen. Within all our parks and our two country parks, And Chair, just the last point, you're correct, there has been funding in this budget for footways, and that also includes our parks. And then that's actually subject to an exercise to get the community's views on where that spend should be prioritised, which I think is kicking off relatively soon. So we will continue to support trying to get capital funding, but it has to be prioritised in the round with other demands on the council's budget. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much. Eileen, I see your hands raised.
It was just on reference regarding litter, dog filing, etc., and things like that. And I think Michael Midland was 100% right. People are now beginning to say, well, it's not the council, it is people. And so it is people, because you just have to see it. But what I did want to say is that since it's now daylight, I'm out early doors. Not so much in the winter, but in the summer I'm out really early doors, and I can only praise very much your workforce, Michael, who are out there from the back of 6 in the morning litter picking in all areas that I walk in and in this town, and I'm assuming that would be the same elsewhere. Now, yesterday as it was, I said to Lynn, that's a bit of a selfless task, because in 2 or 3 hours when the schools come back up or folks start to come, it'll get just as bad again. And we had a wee chat, but the men and women operatives that I know who are out are doing an excellent job, and really I think everything that was said, you can only keep plugging at it and try to raise awareness and try to take people to court if you pause or fine them or whatever you're going to do. But it's not for the lack of workforce. I don't know how it works in other areas, but I know here in my own town, because I see it every day, that the men, well, in the main it's men, are out there early doors getting everything cleaned up. And I can only thank them for that and hope that eventually, I think we must be one of the dirtiest nations in Europe. But anyway, that's besides. I just think they do a good job, and I think the media and the different things that are getting punted out can only help, and we can just continue. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Logan. Alec, I see your hands raised.
It was just a couple of points. A lot of people are asking, and I'm not quite sure if Michael addressed this or not, for a programme of awareness, trying to get the public themselves to realise what damage they're doing by littering, and try and encourage them not to see if we can improve the situation, because it is becoming more apparent. How much of it's to do with COVID, I don't know. The second issue is that many local villages, etc., have their own litter tidy up days, and they often get equipment from the council. Now, because of COVID, that's not possible, is it? But is it possible to put together a package so that these communities who are doing work around their own villages can still access equipment to do that, whether it be they then need to isolate it for a period of time or something, so that this can still happen? Because nothing attracts rubbish more than more rubbish. And if we can allow the local communities to help themselves, it's very much a good thing.
I think Tom's team have had a media campaign for a wee while now, Alec, on litter, the Egypt campaign. But I'll ask Michael to come in the back of that as well.
Yeah, Chair, you're correct. We have been pushing out the messages initially about just the environmental impact of fly tipping and litter. More latterly, 2 messages about the cost, and the third message is, if we catch you, we will charge you. And we'll continue to do that. I think, just going back to Councillor Eileen Logan's I think the penny's starting to drop. This is a behavioural issue. It's a lack of civic pride. And through the preparation of the litter strategy we took to the last Climate Change Committee, through that promotion, we will engage with communities and stakeholders to reinforce that message as best we possibly can. And we will work with the likes of Keep Scotland Beautiful. Just on the second point, I will take that up with the colleagues, in particular Ian Guild. I'd like to think, Councillor Allison, that we will be able to support. In the back of my head, I think we are, but you've put a question mark there that I'll go and check with Ian Guild, and we'll come back to members just to make you aware of what the service we can provide, whether we can provide equipment, but we can certainly pick up the litter that's unfortunately been deposited. So I will come back to you, Councillor, if that's okay, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, Alec.
No, just an update to Michael. Now, I know a local village was looking to do a litter pick and couldn't get equipment from the council. COVID was told as the reason. Yes, they will pick up bags of litter that are collected, but they couldn't supply the equipment to do it.
Okay, let me check that out, Chair. Thanks.
Right, thanks. Monique?
Hi, thanks, John. Actually, I wanted to speak about Ian Guild and his team, especially Emma. I think they've been doing an amazing job, and I know that when they've been working with the East Kilbride Litter Group, they've been supplying the bags and picking up the rubbish, but the group has been out and got their own litter pickers. So that's maybe what would help clear it up, for Alec. And the council have done an amazing job, and the fact is we are dealing with COVID behaviour, where people that should know better and do know better are just not behaving properly, and then everybody wants to blame the council, which is an SNP administration, and I'm a Labour councillor, but it's just like I'm not going to allow when our officers are doing such a good job and working so hard with the local community to clear up after other people that are behaving badly. So, we'd like that recognised. Also, Jim, with your point to Calder Glen, I agree with you. I remember that when we built K Park Training Academy in 2011, the census at that point was we had 74,000 people in East Kilbride. Obviously, it's now moved on. I had to hand figures into council at that point so that they could see what the turnover was for people coming into K Park Training Academy. And I remember it was 277,000 people visited the academy in the first year it was open. And the council at that point, the tourist figures, it was like 500,000. So, but obviously, census, I know it's been put off to next year, but it's probably going to be nearer 81 or 82,000 people in East Kilbride. So it's going to have jumped up by nearly 10,000 people. So there will be a lot more people using Calder Glen Country Park. That obviously brings the litter. And again, the parkies at Calder Glen have been absolutely and utterly fantastic working with the local police. What I would say is, and I thought, Michael, this might be something that could help the council, would be we do have a community empowerment team, and also I know that Calder Glen Country Park has a Friends of Calder Glen Facebook group. We could actually work with them to actually get more funding in, which means it's coming and it's done through, so it's like the council working in partnership with the community, because that is definitely working with the litter pickers, and it's getting a good response. So we could look at that and then see about bringing money in through third-party funding, which could then help, working with getting the pathways in and dealing with landslides and whatever else, because there is a lot more users in the park. Anyway, that was just what it was. But thank you for your time.
Oh, thanks for these comments, Marie. Take them on board. I noticed Tom's hand was up. Sorry I didn't bring you in, Tom. Is there something you wanted to add?
I was just going to try and respond to some of Councillor Allison's points, but Michael McGlynn and Councillor McAdams have pretty much got there. I would say that most of the requests for litter picking from the community come to us through social media, so I see a lot of them, and it's very heartening how many we've been getting. Yeah. In fact, and we have been using, I know that Ian Guild's team have been assisting those groups in their work in different ways at the moment, but assisting them. There's been such a response we found from the communities that we're actually looking to automate a form, basically, so that the same way that groups can come on and say street lamps are out, they can come in and say, look, we want to litter pick, here's where we want to do it, and this is when we want to do it, and we can facilitate things that way. So just to make that point, there are a majority out there that are good-minded citizens who want to help rather than hinder the process.
No, that's great. I mean, I would fully endorse that. I know since the start of COVID, the response we've had from communities has been fantastic. And we did talk some time ago about not losing that and trying to harness it in any way we possibly could. So the idea that we're getting so many groups coming forward willing to litter pick is really encouraging. Robert, I see your hands up.
Yeah, just on the same issue, I'd had this discussion with Ian Guild as well about voluntary groups and so forth, and it is the litter pickers that is the challenge. One or two groups have got private funding for that from grants and this, that, and the other, but if you don't, and it can often be the case that there's a number of places where that isn't the case, that is particularly the challenge. Now, it's cross-contamination that I think the department are worried about, which is fair enough. When Michael sort of checks back on this, I wonder perhaps if we can just look at whether we can clear that as a sort of thing the council can do. Perhaps at the next round on the 17th of May, I think it is, when we move into level 2, all being well, because I think at that point, it should presumably be possible to give that sort of support without particular problem. The other point is that Keep Scotland Beautiful has got its, I think it's called the Summer Clean event, going from about the 28th of May onwards, and it may well be we can focus in on that with the support that they give as well, just on that timing thing, just to kind of make a bit of a bang on this sort of thing, really, you know. And I think maybe social media and all that can push that sort of message too.
Thanks, Robert. We'll note that in as well and see what we can do there. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'll move the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thanks very much. That takes us on to item 7, which is the live streaming of committee and council meetings, pages 131 to 136. And I would invite Geraldine to speak to this item, please.
Thank you, Chair. The report sets out partly the journey that the Council has been on since the beginning of the pandemic to allow the committee meetings to take place. And as you know, we have been through the pilot initially when it was only councillors involved. Then we moved to hybrid, where we had a mixture. Then with the second lockdown, we moved back to wholly virtual meetings. And in Section 4, it sets out the process that we've been on since the beginning of 2021 to find a way of allowing the public to have access to those virtual meetings. We have, as you know, improved Teams service now, Teams system that allows 49 attendees to be visible on the screen, which is a better viewing experience for the public. We have also opened up the issued invites to the local democracy reporter for any matter that is non-exempt. So the local democracy reporter has been invited to attend all meetings virtually. And we have also, where there's been licensing meetings where applicants have to attend, or the Education Appeals last year, or we've recently had a planning committee where there was a hearing requested and objectors attended. This has all been made possible via issuing invites through Teams for these people to join the meeting. So we have come a long way since last year. Council in December last year took the decision to work towards the live broadcasting of all committee and council meetings, and we, as you know, we had a test in March of the Finance and Corporate Committee, and this is set out in Section 5, what we did there. The test went well. We had a minor hitch at the beginning of it where we had a delay in actually streaming to YouTube, but then it went well. That was overcome, and a solution is put in place to prevent that from happening again. We have recorded meetings, and we have a contractor previously, a contractor engaged to subtitle those recorded meetings. Now, the subtitling has taken longer than expected, but that's because of the process. The process involves a transcript being issued to us with a low-res version of the subtitling, and our officers have to check that. It's a very, very detailed transcript. So, for example, a committee meeting, it could be a transcript, an Excel spreadsheet running to 15, 16 pages, because every word is noted on it. Our officers have to go through that. That is taking a substantial amount of officer time. So that's why you haven't seen as many of the recorded meetings on the subtitled versions on the YouTube channel. But we have got a lot of these waiting to be uploaded. But we've processed the live streaming, and today is your first formal meeting that is being live streamed to it. We have the technology in place to do that, and we are also currently working towards how we're going to deliver this for the hybrid meetings if they resume later in the year. And the intention is there is set out in 5.4 of the report. As we don't currently have the technology or equipment in place which would afford the public a good viewing experience of a live streamed blended committee meeting, as we don't have a camera installed in either of the council chamber or committee rooms that automatically focuses on the speaker, because as you know, we've been using the Microsoft Surface Hub or an external video supplier to do that for us. And also the fixed microphone system that's in the council chamber and the wireless microphones in committee 1, room 1, are not digital, and these can't be connected directly into a live stream broadcast. We need to come up with something that is going to resolve all of this, and we are investigating options that are available for us to live stream blended committee meetings, and we're intending to bring proposals back to a future meeting of the council. So what are we proposing to do, given that there is a lot of additional work associated with live streaming? We are proposing to live stream all of the meetings which are listed on committee appendix 1 to the report, and that's on page 135. Now that is all of the council meetings and all of the main committees and area committees of the council. The only things that we are not going to live stream are the forums meetings, and one we're proposing not to live stream during that period is the forum meetings and the conference allocation committee. However, we do propose to live stream those from the 17th of August onwards, because that time we will have had more technical experience in delivering the live streaming. Officers will be more accustomed to the equipment, and we will be able to do everything from the 17th of August onwards. So taking you back to recommendations in the report, I'm asking you to note the update on the pilot to live stream the Finance and Corporate Resources meeting on the 17th of March, to approve the proposals to live stream to the South Lanarkshire Council YouTube channel the non-restricted element of business of the council meetings. That's anything that's not exempt. And to live stream the meetings listed in Appendix 1 up until the commencement of the summer recess in July, and to approve that the proposal to record, to continue to record and subtitle, as we had been doing before, the non-restricted elements of the forum meetings and publish to the council website, and to approve the proposal to live stream the non-restricted elements of the forum meetings from the 17th of August onwards. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Geraldine. Before I move to the recommendations for this item, obviously this item is non-political. What we're trying to do here is obtain the best way forward to represent everyone within the council. But I know there is a discussion to be had about whether we purely look at the idea of presenting the live streaming without the subtitles or with the subtitles. And I really would like to get the views of members here on whether or what their preference is on this, whether we're doing the right thing by putting out the videos without the subtitles, or whether we should wait until such times as we have the full package. I see that there is some hands raised, so before we look at recommendations, I think we need a discussion on this. So I see I've got Gladys Miller's hands raised first.
Thanks, Chair. In point 4.4 on page 132, is asking us to approve publishing the meeting before it's subtitled, which this is really a U-turn and a decision that we made in December. It's also a U-turn in equalities and inclusion. I feel it's not inclusive, and effectively it treats our deaf and hard of hearing community like second-class citizens. We're saying all hearing people are more important than deaf and hard of hearing citizens. We're saying it's important to get this quick to the hearing community, but deaf and hard of hearing people, you'll get it when it's ready, when it's subtitled. And effectively, I feel that it's making the act of subtitling a box tick rather than making a statement for inclusion. Now, I know we're probably the only council with a deaf councillor, and he can't watch the hearing version either. So, he'll have to wait until the subtitled version's ready. But I feel that we should be leading the way, and I don't think it matters what other councils are doing. We should be doing what we know is right and moral. Now, I mentioned the word moral because I've heard the term legal applied to from officers on what they're trying to do here. It's legal for us to ignore deaf people, deaf and hard of hearing people. But colleagues, it wasn't that long ago that it was legal to discriminate against disabilities, both direct and indirect, but it was never moral. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I think I've got Monique up next.
Thanks,
Monique.
Chair. Thanks, Chair. Gladys, you pretty much have said it all, and that was great. A couple of things that I'm going to say, and I'll get back to my original speech because you nailed it, was that, Geraldine, there's a couple of things I'm concerned about. I'm concerned that we are paying for a service that isn't fit for purpose, because you've mentioned that our officers need to go back over the recording, taking up a considerable amount of their time. This is public people's money that we're dealing with. So if we're paying for a service, it should be a service that's fit for purpose. It should do its job. It shouldn't then mean that officers have then got to go back over it. That means that what we've chosen doesn't work and it really needs looked at again. Also, we have not made any reasonable adjustments to be inclusive. Legal have said that there is an option to me on YouTube that you can select subtitles. I didn't know that. So is MD going to go out and tell the deaf community? Because I don't know if they know that either. Now, the other thing that I'll say is Legal have been kind enough to share with me the shared British Sign Language plans for Lanarkshire for 2018 to 24. Sets out the goals, our long-term goals for public services and for information and services to be accessible to BSL. I would just like to remind everybody, we've just been through a pandemic. We're not even through it. We're just right in the middle of it, or we might even be at the start of it, for all we know. So this desperately needs looked at because, a year and a half ago, we weren't doing things online. We were able to actually, be in the same hall as each other. We don't know when that's going to happen again, and that's something that also needs looked at. Legal also let me know that they were aware, as Gladys correctly pointed out, that there was no other local authorities that currently provided a signer, whether it was on webcasts or for council committee meetings. I have to say, wow, it's just because nobody else is doing it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing it. And I discussed this with my group before we come on. I pointed out about car parking spaces. It's just they had to be made bigger so that it meant that people with disabilities that were either driving or basically would be in cars had enough room to actually get out. We used to have a one-size-fits-all space. It didn't mean it was right. So we've all been elected to serve our community, and our communities do have hard of hearing and deaf people in it. They are being excluded. And this is wrong. it's as Gladys said, it's just like, it might be legal, but morally it's wrong. So I'm just going to point out again that there's been no reasonable adjustments have been made today. So South Lanarkshire Council hasn't even pinned an interpreter so that our deaf community and our deaf councillor can basically be included in today's meeting. To say that I'm disappointed doesn't even cover it. What I would also point out, and John, you're right, it shouldn't be a political point, but I'm going to make one anyway. The British Sign Language Scotland Act 2015 was passed under an SNP-ran Scottish Government. This is an SNP-ran administration, and this is how you're treating one of your own. That's a disgrace.
Monique, I'm not going to take that criticism. We're trying to do the best thing possible here, hence the reason why we're discussing it. So I'm not going to take that response from you. This is non-political. I said that at the beginning. We're trying to get the best way forward. So I think if we keep it at that and be reasonable in our responses. Can I take Councillor Falconer?
Thanks, Chair. Just quickly on that. I was just to ask Geraldine, I noticed all the committees that you're taking. I noticed that IJB isn't getting filmed. This is a committee that spends £300 million of our budget. Is there a reason for that?
Geraldine?
Councillor Faulkner, the IJB is an independent body, so we would need agreement from the Health and Social Care Partnership, the NHS, the other partners involved, before we could move to recording that or filming that.
Okay. Councillor Brown?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. Can I say, first of all, can I welcome the progress that's been made on this? This is something that the Liberal Democrat group have been pushing for quite a long time in terms of the rights of people to access council meetings. Now, leaving aside for the moment the hard of hearing issue, which has been so eloquently dealt with by other people, we are at risk here, if we're not very careful, of ending up in a position where everybody is excluded from access to meetings. This is actually a big opportunity in many ways to widen democratic participation. And I don't think we should lose track of that particular point, so that the actual ability to actually live stream the committee meetings and the council meetings, I think, is a major democratic advance. And I think it has the opportunity of allowing and encouraging, and we should be actually making quite a big thing of this, many more people to actually have a look at what we're doing as their democratic representatives on the council. So I think it's hugely important that the live streaming does kick off and does continue. Now, manifestly, we've got duties as well, both moral and legal, towards people who have got hearing issues. And I think it seems to me to be, I don't quite understand why we've moved back from using the admittedly more limited subtitling facility on YouTube, why that can't actually just be put in place. There are limitations to it. I think we know that. We know that actually from BBC and television things as well. There are limitations in the subtitling arrangements on these national media programs as well. Now, manifestly, we do want to be top of the game on this particular matter. So the issues about BSL interpretation and all that, I think, have got to be dealt with too. But for the time being, let's move on to the thing. Let's get cracking with giving the broad population access to the council proceedings. Let's subtitle the actual things as they go forward. Can I be clear on one point? Once the thing has been actually, if you don't listen in when it's actually been broadcast, can you then listen to the YouTube version straight off with the subtitlings attached to it, or do you have to wait for the recorded version? I think if we have that gap in the process, that's going to be quite a difficult thing to do as well. We shouldn't, I think, have that particular position. And then finally, I think points being made by other people is the issue about the way in which the whole subtitling thing has been taken forward. We did have a discussion about this again at the leaders group. It does sound a very expensive and clunky sort of way of doing it. And whilst I think we all agree with the objective, can we have a further look at what the best way of tackling that is, given the experience of what we've got here? We do want to end up, if I may say so, with a position where both the general public and people with hard of hearing issues are able to access these things. But let's not make if you like, the absolute perfect the enemy of moving on as fast as we can of the whole procedure as well. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks, Robert. Geraldine, can you possibly come back on the point Robert raised there about the time lag between YouTube?
Yes, Chair. Thank you, Chair. As soon as the live stream video goes out today, there is at the bottom of the YouTube screen, there is it looks like a page with wavy lines across it. If you click on that, the subtitles are available. So from the minute it's launched today, people will be able to see that. And the YouTube video will be there until the next meeting of this committee, and then it would be archived. And the intention is that the archived meeting would then have the subtitles applied. So, but otherwise, the YouTube subtitles will be available. And as Councillor Brown pointed out, they're not wholly accurate. So if you see them, you will see it doesn't pick up your names properly. It won't pick up some of your comments, but it is available. An accurate version would be available once it's archived. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We'll move on just now and take some more comments. Councillor Loudon.
Thanks very much, Chair. I absolutely agree with Gladys on this, and I'm really pleased to hear her making a clear distinction there between what is legal and what is actually right. I thought she articulated that point very, very well, and it's something that we should keep hold of. I don't think it's good enough to say, oh, well, many more people can access recordings or can access meetings when not everybody can. I know I spoke about this at a previous meeting, and accessibility in general on our website is something which I have raised before in the Equal Opportunities Forum as well. It's interesting, actually, that we're having these conversations in the context of what has been said around accessibility when manifestos were published, because unfortunately it's been a really mixed bag of what's available. So sadly, since we did bring politics into it, Gladys and I have expressed the frustration of many, many members of our group. And I see that Peter, for example, is waiting to speak as well. And also in the wider political context, so if we're talking about manifestos, some parties should really know better than to throw stones here. And really, I'm disappointed that that's the route that was taken, because fundamentally, I think all of us, or most of us, agree here, and we understand the important principles that are in play. Just to touch on Monique's point about YouTube subtitles as well, auto-generated aren't good enough. I absolutely agree with her on that. For a start, we're notoriously bad at picking up Scottish accents, and it might be quite interesting to watch the YouTube version of this and put on the auto-generated captions to see what happens. But what's before us today, what's in section 4.4, I'm really not happy with just now. It's not clear, there's no timetable for when videos would be replaced as is being suggested. So what we've got before us is putting into print, then we're being asked to agree that we'd be happy with accessible videos being made accessible as an afterthought, really. And I don't think that's good enough.
Thanks very much, Katie. Can I bring in Cleland just now? I think Cleland wants to make a comment. Cleland.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to all the members making the comments. I think just setting out a couple of points. First of all, the intention to try to be inclusive of deaf and hard of hearing communities and those who wish to participate or to view any of our proceedings. So that is our basic premise. I've heard comment to say, well, it's irrelevant what other authorities are doing, but I think it's important to put in context. This authority, in terms of where we've reached, where we're going with this, is doing something that no other local authority in Scotland is doing. And in fact, as best I understand it, goes beyond anything you'll find in Westminster or Holyrood. So our aspirations are at the very highest point here, we have put in place the arrangements. When we're referring our videos to this company, and if you remember Geraldine's previous paper, we said we would do this for 6 months, we would review the cost of it, the quality of it, and then we would bring something back to see whether it's actually better to do this in-house. We cannot just take a transcript of a meeting from a third party and not review it and just upload it, because it's a formal record of council. So there is a necessary process and there is a delay within that approach. What I'm hearing from members, though, is regardless of the fact that we are leading the pack, members want us to do more and do something even more inclusive. And what I'm hearing is that there is a request for a live BSL signer to be part of all of our meetings, regardless of participants, and to have that available. Now, we need to go and look at that. We need to then bring that back in terms of members understanding the cost consequence and the practicalities of that. And that's something we could do. We could do it in conjunction with the Equalities Forum if that was an appropriate forum to review this prior to it coming back here. So this is politically led. We'll take a steer from members as to what you want us to deliver on it. Final point I would make is the reference to the option in section 4.4. Some councillors had said that their preference, and I think we heard from Councillor Brown, is that we don't sit on a recording without subtitling, awaiting, pending the subtitle version, but that we do make it available. I hear from other members that that's viewed as discriminatory. And we've heard that there is this YouTube app. I think one of the things we've learned from one or two authorities who have used that is, and I think it's Councillor Loudon's point, you can end up with a bit of gobbledygook coming up, and sometimes the app doesn't deal terribly well with West Central Scotland accents, etc., or names. So just to say that this authority is leading the pack. We'll go as far as members wish us to go to ensure that we're as inclusive as possible. But if that's a clear request for us, give us a chance to go and work out the practicalities and the cost of that, and we'll report it back to this committee via the Equalities Forum. But that would be my request. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Cleland. Right, I see Alec's hands up. Alec.
Yeah, John. A lot of the things have been said by Cleland and Robert. I basically support Robert's position that we do need to make sure that this moves forward quickly. There are two main issues: transparency and equality. They should not impinge on each other. I would like to see the transparency clearly now and going forward. I don't think that it should be held up. Yes, equality is important. Yes, we do need officers to work on that as fast as possible to ensure that everyone has equal access, but it should not hold up access in the short term while that is worked out. We've already had the idea of pinning, which I think is a good one, and moving it and moving things forward. I think it's also very important that we do check if before the final recording with subtitles goes up, because that then becomes a council document, and that does need to be accurate, and we cannot put that out to tender if you like. That has to be checked, and that will take time. I would accept that we use the YouTube, what do you call it, lines in the short term until these are available, with the rider on it that they are simply that sorry, I've forgotten the right words for it, that the headlines are not guaranteed to be correct. But we should not slow down this process at all. We work as hard as we can to get everyone involved.
Thanks, Alec. Peter.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to name check Councillor Graham Campbell and the cross-party working group and the work that's going on to have live streaming actually on the air. That's been an ambition for the cross-party working group for the last 3.5 years. and I have to say it's been a hard fight to actually get that happening. And we're now at the situation where we are live streaming, that people, if they wish to, can watch these debates live as they're being performed. Then to say that that we shouldn't be doing that because there's nobody, there's no subtitles and there's no interpreter, it's making the good the enemy of the perfect, and that we should never do. I'm really pleased at the progress that's been made so far. It's been a hard fight, and Graham, if he were here, he would be saying exactly the same thing. It's been a hard fight to get where we are just now. Technology has improved enormously over the last few years. Over the last year, we've actually seen how fast it can improve. And I've no doubt in the future, we will improve the service to our deaf community. It's not as good as I would like it to be, and I'll say that straight up, but it's much better than it's ever been before. And I would expect technology to improve dramatically and timescales to be cut as we move through this. It's taken us 3.5 years to get to the point we are just now. What can happen in the next 6 months? And I'll certainly be pushing along with everyone else to make sure that our deaf community has a part to play in that. So thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks, Peter. Joe?
Thanks, Chair. If we maybe talk about the generalities, but we could also just say in a practical point, as we've been having this conversation, I did take a wee look at YouTube, and it's actually not obvious to me that there are any lines way there otherwise that would allow me to activate subtitles just to kind of check what is being said against the conversation. So, and I have to say, I appreciate the difficulties here. So we did have if we go back to December, I think we had a very long, thorough conversation about it, and I think, to be fair to Councillor Miller, these issues were raised at that time, and that there is clearly a tension between the fact that we're not able to have the public in our meetings just now, and we want to be able to be as transparent as we possibly can, and making sure that it is done so in as accessible and inclusive way as possible. After that meeting, I did spend a good bit of time looking at some other local authorities and their setups, and some of the sort of spectacular failures, frankly, of the automatic subtitling. So I appreciate there are particular issues there. I would like to know a bit more about what those barriers are. And I think if we know what those barriers are, we could try to address them. So, for example, I appreciate this issue of the turnaround time. But if we are to make that a priority, to what would the and potentially do that in-house, I'm just wondering how quickly or how could we accommodate live subtitling as the meeting is taking place. I know there's the separate issue of BSL, and I appreciate actually BSL, we've had those issues with I think it's a very specialist job. I have to say I'm amazed actually when you think of the sheer volume of information that has to be conveyed and sometimes in a very short space of time, and sometimes those of us like myself actually that can speak quite fast in some of these meetings don't make life easy for interpreters. So I appreciate there's a separate issue there, but in that first issue of the subtitling, I would like to understand what the actual barriers are that are preventing us from being able to not just turn it around quicker, but actually maybe get to a point where we're able to subtitle as we go. I think it seems to me that any kind of human being, frankly, that is trained would offer a better service than some of the automatic subtitling facilities. So that's on that accessibility issue. I'd just like to get some feedback on that. I do think we have to bear in mind during the pandemic that we do still have to be open. There are particular meetings where I think there has been interest from the public in attending, but they wouldn't be possible to attend because the meeting is online. That's why we have to live stream. So planning in particular, I think there has been some particular concerns about. And the other point I want to make is just around the format of our meetings more generally. The paper alludes to the forward progress towards how we might accommodate a hybrid meeting. Leaders have had this discussion, but I do think it's worth putting before the committee that we have to be very mindful of COVID safety at all times. But if we are progressing out of lockdown, and we hope, progressing through these various levels, then we would expect that in all likelihood there would be some form of public in-person presence in the council chamber before too long. And we have to make sure that whatever we do, that doesn't sort of push us back, that doesn't take us in the opposite direction. And so I would be quite keen to reassure members and probably the public as well that leaders have had that initial discussion. But I'd be quite keen to see us as soon as possible get to a point where we've got a rough timetable for actually being able to move to the hybrid model and have councillors back in the council chamber and the committee rooms where it is safe and appropriate to do so.
Thanks, Joe. Can Geraldine or someone give some indication about Joe's first point, and also maybe if I can add one as well about what the probable timescale would be to have a BSL signer at the resource committees and the executive. We spoke about that earlier on. How long do you think that would be able to take us to put that in hand? Geraldine or
Chair, is it okay if I maybe try and bring all the points together? And I'll maybe just start off with the potential of an in-house provision. So members agreed that we would run this for a period of time. I think it was 6 months, and then we would report back on the service that we'd commissioned. And as part of that, we would look at whether it was more economic and better quality for us to employ somebody in-house to do this piece of work. And that process is underway just now to review the experience of doing these meetings. As to having almost a real-time transcriber, if you want to call it, almost like a stenographer, trying to type up subtitles in pace with members' contributions throughout a fairly long meeting. I think we're a long way away from that. That is a real challenge, and I'm sure Councillor Fagan, for example, acknowledging that he speaks quite fast at certain points, wouldn't want to be slowed down by an officer going, "Hold on a minute, I'm trying to catch up with you." I think that's maybe something for a bit of a kind of longer term look. As to the discussion we had with group leaders, we acknowledge at the moment we don't have the issue in front of us because of the continuing public health concerns and restrictions. We anticipate we're going to go a long way until, if ever, we can say that there are no COVID concerns. So I think the discussion that we had in the group leaders meeting was we're going to have to learn to live with COVID to some extent, and the way that we undertake our meetings. I don't foresee any time in the short to medium term, if ever, that we would have a wholly in-person meeting. I'd certainly counsel the council not to decide to hold only in-person meetings. And the reason for that is there's some members who will have underlying health conditions for whom coming into an environment, regardless of case numbers, etc., would present a potential risk, and they would be uncomfortable in doing so. And the council could not preclude any member from representing their constituents and acting in their capacity. So I go back to the section 5.4 in the paper, where Geraldine's outlined some of the work that's underway just now to try to cost up what technology, what kit we will require to run virtual meetings the way that we would want to do, where you've got a camera that would locate onto the individual who's speaking, some in the room and some meeting virtually. I also heard from group leaders that actually there are other reasons, obviously, that members would not want to come into an in-person meeting if they could avoid it and could participate virtually in the way that we're doing just now. That includes work commitments, caring commitments, etc., which allows people without the commitment of time to travel to and from Armada Street to participate in meetings. And I heard quite clearly from group members that's a particular benefit they would want to see retained. So just to summarise that point then, Leader, that work will be done about what we need to purchase and put in place to allow virtual meetings to be effectively the model, blended meetings, to be virtually the model going forward. And as I say, I don't actually see an end point to that. I think that's something that's going to be with us for an awful long period of time, subject to how the virus mutates and vaccines and various other things. But hopefully that gives us confidence that we will do a proper evaluation of the subtitling service we get, and we will look at whether it's better to bring that in-house and whether we can get a better quality, a quicker turnaround, and more cost effective to do that. But I think all the points that Councillor Fagan's raised are things that have been part of that discussion with the group leaders, and we'd be happy to take forward subject to the decision of committee today. Thanks.
Thanks, Cleland. I'm just wondering if it would be possible to get agreement to publish on the basis that we get a BSL signer to attend all of our meetings, if that would help the situation and move the situation on. Would that be something that members would agree to? And would that be something that may take us through this? I see we've got some more hands up. I don't want to keep the thing going, but I'll allow the hands that are up just now to come in. Alan, you've got your hand up. Alan Faulkner.
Councillor Faulkner, you're on mute.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a couple of points. I'll come back to my question to Geraldine about the IJB. She said it'd be up to them to decide. The IJB, for people who don't know, is made up of 4 councillors and 4 health board. And in fact, the council have the chair of that. So I'd look forward to meeting Geraldine to see how we take that proposal forward. Bearing in mind there's a £300 million our money in that, and it deals with some of the most vulnerable people in our community. The other point I want to, being hard to hear myself, I've got to agree with a lot of the comments made today, but what strikes me, we're talking about disability, in the opposition rooms, which are 2 floors up, we have no vacuum chair, and we have several members there who have got disabilities. In fact, there's one member in a wheelchair, and that isn't this administration. That's been there for day one, and I think it's something we should look into. Thank you.
Quite agree, Alan. Okay, thanks very much. Gladys, I'll take Gladys and Monique, and then we'll try to reach a conclusion. Gladys.
Thanks, Chair. I was reflecting on some of the comments that have been made. Councillor Brown's comments expresses a real anxiousness, clearly, to get the videos out. And he said it's the right of the people to access the meetings. What was missing in there was it was the right of the hearing people. Because if that is published, we are missing out deaf and hard of hearing people. There was also, I think we need some awareness, and I think that is really lacking, and it's clear because there is no such thing. It's not hearing issues. People don't have hearing issues. People are deaf or hard of hearing. That's it, and they don't consider themselves as hearing issues. I used to teach deaf awareness many years ago, and I've never heard that term before. Cleland had mentioned that it's important to take cognizance of what other councils are doing. Other councils do not have a deaf councillor. In terms of, John, you mentioned a BSL signer. That will then include the deaf people, big D, but it'll exclude people that are hard of hearing because they need the subtitles. Otherwise, you could probably hear their TV in space.
Thanks, Gladys. I'm not sure where we go after that comment. Monique?
Aye, thanks, John. I had asked a question, and when I had said that I was concerned that we were paying for a service that wasn't fit for purpose, i.e. that our officers needed to go back over the recording, taking up a considerable amount of time, I would like basically that to be looked at. The other thing is the comments have all been, well, the majority of them have been great, and I appreciate, Cleland, that you're taking on board that we need to make a reasonable adjustment to be inclusive. I think that's that we all need a deaf awareness. I mean, every day is a school day, and it's only when you have, deaf friends or friends that are hard of hearing that basically you start to get more deaf awareness and start to think about things. So I think it'd just be a case of if anybody was to think about a member of their family, if they were not being allowed to be able to do their job properly to the fullest extent of their abilities, or that they were feeling excluded as a community member, it was like, how would you then feel? And I think that's all we need to do, to be honest with you. And Gladys has got a lot of the same points as me, so I'll not go over the ones that she did. But when it came to Councillor Brown, who I hugely respect, I felt that what he missed out was that it was our deaf councillor that was going to be excluded, because he's actually part of the council. So it's like, yeah, the meetings are there for the council for us to make decisions about the community, but he's one of ours, so we should be looking after him at the same time. And the other thing was, Katie and I love the banter. And Katie, do you know what? Everything that you've said today is correct. Okay, and I totally take it on board. And you know what? Labour were late getting their manifesto out, so somebody needs a hand slapped. But you'll be really pleased to know, though, if you go onto labour.org.uk, we have a full audio, braille, easy to read, large print, and our BSL manifesto summaries for anybody that wants to have a look at them. So thank you.
Thanks very much. Listen, folks, I'm not going to take any longer on this. I'm unsatisfied with the result, and I'm not sure we can come to a conclusion. So my preference would be to refer this back for some further discussion. And I'm not talking about delaying the situation. I would like to see something happen as quickly as possible after this meeting, where we get some people together and we try and find the best way possible to advance this without taking up time. I'm aware that everybody wants to get these meetings out as quickly as possible, but I'm aware it's very difficult. People have unconscious bias, and it's very difficult if you're not a hard of hearing person to put yourself in their position. And we need people like Councillor Miller and Councillor McAdam to try and give us an insight into how other people feel. So I feel we'd be doing a disjustice taking this forward at this present time and making the decision without knowing a wee bit more about where we want to go with this. So I would prefer to refer this matter back for further discussion. Can I have agreement on that?
Chair, I think Cleland wants to come in at the moment.
Cleland.
Chair, assuming, it's a big assumption, but assuming that committee agrees, can I be clear about a couple of things? We wouldn't want to take a step back to take a step forward. So I'm assuming that committee, if they agree with you, would also wish us to continue to record meetings as we've been doing. Yeah. They would also wish us to continue to use live streaming pending these discussions, so we don't stop things that we've put in place. And if I could also suggest, subject to those discussions, that officers are given a chance to provide advice around the practicalities and costs of those. And depending on where you want to route this, it could go to a group leaders discussion if that's your delegation, or it could go to the Equalities Forum and then back to Executive Committee. But I just wanted to be clear, you don't want us to stop things that we've already got in place. As I said, we're ahead of the pack just now. We want to remain ahead of the pack in terms of that journey towards full inclusion, pending the further discussions you've intimated.
Yeah, exactly as you exactly as you said, Cleland. We take it forward. Can I have agreement from members to take it forward on that basis?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thanks very much. To move on to item 8, which is revenue budget and level of local taxation. This is an item for noting, and I would ask Paul to comment on this, please.
Okay, thanks, Chair. The purpose of the paper, and this is something that we have to do periodically, depending on where our or your approval of the budget sits in terms of the timescale of the local government finance order being laid before Parliament. So the paper starts off by looking at the fact that when we had got the budget approved, the council had not yet had final confirmation of its budget through the local government finance order 2021. So that, the council approved the budget in February. That went in front of Parliament on the 18th of March 2021. Now, what section 4.2 picks up is, what did the order say when it went in front of Parliament in comparison to what we believed the budget was going to be when the council approved the budget on the 24th of February. So at section 4.3, what you can see is there was an increase of £15.329 million in terms of that budget, which is the grant given to the council when it went before Parliament. Now, that's our share, and this is picked up in that paragraph as well, of the council's allocation of that amount I referred to earlier on, which was the £259 million of COVID funding coming in year 2021-22. There is another amount, and that wasn't included in the order. And you can see that detailed at section 4.4, and that was the council's share of an amount of £40 million, which the Cabinet Secretary announced in March. That won't be paid to us until March 2022. Now, what the paper goes on to talk about after that is to pick up the position in terms of pay negotiations, and it looks at the government's revised public sector pay policy, and it also refers to the stance taken by COSLA leaders in respect of that, and there's a table in there that gives comparison to what the revised public sector pay policy was in comparison to the original one. Now, what that brings me back to, and this is covered at section 4.8, is a proposal on what's done with the council's share of that additional £40 million. And that's an amount of £2.367 million. And as I've said already, it's covered at section 4.8. It's proposed that the full amount of the additional funding be set aside to manage the potential additional costs of pay award, which I can't confirm at this point, given the position we're at in terms of negotiations and a pay settlement. And as section 4.4 notes, I don't yet have any confirmation that that funding's permanent. So the point that's being made there is, if we need to use that £2.367 million in year 21-22 to pay for increased costs of a pay settlement, it will have an impact when we come back to do the budget in year 22-23, because our share of that £40 million right now isn't permanent, and I've got no reason to believe that it will become permanent. So if I can take you back to the recommendations in the paper, it's looking for noting of the receipt of the finance order, noting of that revised budget position, and also that the funding allocations and the associated commitments be noted as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Does any member have a question for Paul? No, I don't see any hands up. I would move the recommendation.
I'll second, Chair.
Thanks very much. There being no other business this morning, can I thank members for their attendance, and can I ask that we resume the Climate Change Committee at 5 to 12? Okay. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.